Hi guys, this is Eric from Dumb Game Dev, and today I'm just going to have a little video about the third-person controller from opsive, as well as behavior designer. Those two things work really well together. But I'm also going to talk about the sensor toolkit, which is super helpful, and I've been using it quite a bit lately. Now, I have all those things already installed. You can find them on the Unity Asset Store, as well as have a link below in this video, so you can check that out. Now, I'm just going to show you what I've done here. And I've got this third-person controller here, and he's already, our third-person character, he's already all set up. He has all of the scripts on him that I want. I have my behavior designer already set up. And what he's going to do is use the sensor toolkit here instead of the can see that comes with behavior designer's movement pack. It's going to use the sensor to see this fake target here that I've set up, and then he's going to be able to choose specific transforms on the target to aim at, so we can choose more than just one target. So if you're just using the basic can see, it's just going to pick one target in the transform and always shoot to that. We want to, maybe set up an arm, a leg, a head, or whatever else and be able to choose those. So if we just look at the character here, and you can hopefully see the sensor I've set up. Let me turn up these gizmos. Okay. So my gizmos are on. And for some reason I cannot see the line of sight. Let's check it out. Okay, I'm not sure why that's not showing up, but maybe you know and I don't know. But he has a nice line of sight set up here about yay large. Oh, there we go. Okay, so that's his line of sight, and it's FOV. I'm just going to hit play, and I do have VRTK set up here because I'm working on something in VR, so that's going to pop up. And we'll go back to our scene view, and as we can see in Behavior Designer, what it's doing is finding the target, and then it's finding some random hit points on the target, random transforms we set up to set the aim to. So he's not actually shooting, but that's okay. We're just doing this as a demonstration purpose. So the nearest target that he can find is this object here. So let's look, and you can say it says sphere, and that's the name of the target. And he's setting his aim to, let's have a look here, to the sphere, to the cube, to the cube, to the cube, to the cube, to the sphere. So it's just randomly choosing targets. So let's talk about how I did this. Again, you're going to need the third-person controller from opsive, behavior designer, and the sensor toolkit. And like I said, these things work really well together. I'm a huge fan of behavior designer. Third-person controller, honestly, I could take it, I could leave it, but it works pretty well out of the box, so that's great. And because it does work with behavior designer, that's a win. Okay, so I'm just going to disable this character that I already have, and I've just got a fresh one here. So let me enable this. And this one has just the basic third-person controller scripts added onto it that you can add using the wizard, which would be under Tools, Behavior, or Third-Person Controller, and then Character Builder, and you build a character, and I've added a weapon to him as well. Now mine is set up as an AI agent, because I'm using this for my AI. Now the target here is called Sphere. Why don't we just call it Target? And why don't we call this like Target, I don't know, Body, so we know what it is. And I've added a child here just as a second target, and so this would be like, say, the target head, right? But this is all one target, so imagine this is just another bad guy in your game. And so to get this to work the way I want it to, I'm going to add a rigid body to it. So add a rigid body to any of your targets, and I'm going to set it to is kinematic. I have also set up the LOS target script, so you just go add component, type LOS, and choose LOS targets. Now here is where you're going to set your targets, and I've got it set to 2 elements, so I'm going to drag in the body and the head, and I don't know, maybe my character had like, I don't know, maybe one arm, so I can create another object and maybe put a capsule in here. And let's adjust this capsule a little. Oops. So let's just say it's like 0.3 by 0.3 by 0.3. And we can rotate this around somehow. And I don't know, here's the arm. Here's another arm. So there's the crazy arm. So we'll call this like arm 1 and arm 2. So we don't need to add a rigid body to this because it's already on the parent here. We just need to make sure that we have a capsule collider. So we've got arm 1, arm 2. So now we've got 4 potential targets here. Let's drag arm 1 and arm 2. Okay, so that's our potential bad guy. So we go back to our AI character, and let me delete that. Okay, so on our AI character, we have the mesh, which makes him seeable, as well as we've got the all the joints and stuff like that to make him movable. So what I'm going to do is add another game object here, because I like to keep this separate. I'm going to create another empty game object, and I'm going to call mine sensor. And I'm just going to put mine here at the very top, just below the top position. And now we need to add some components for his can see. We need sort of that vision cone. And honestly, I can't remember the exact. We'll see if it's on here. Okay, let's see what we can find. Sensor. Right, so we're using the trigger sensor. There's different types of sensors. If you're going to use my actions that I already created, then you're going to need to use the trigger sensor. So let's go ahead and choose the trigger sensor. And now what is it called? Let me check here. I've forgotten. It's like field of view or something. So it's an FOV collider, field of view collider. Go back here and we'll add an FOV collider. Boop, there we go. So now it adds this collider. So now why I've added this as a separate game object is I like to move the position of this and offset it. Oh, excuse me, sneeze there. Okay. So I like to offset it. I don't want it to be sort of at the feet, and there's no options to offset based on this. So I make it its own game object, and maybe we'll increase the length so you can see farther. Maybe increase the base size, reduce the angle, or the height. So you can go ahead and play with this until you have like a reasonable field of view that you like. I like to change the resolution to 1. Okay, so that's pretty good. And so now we need to actually set up the sensor. So on the sensor, there's certain options that I find that are more that work better. So I'm definitely going to enable a tag filter. And I'm going to just set 1 tag. And let's go to my target and give him a tag. So I've got him set as 2. So for me, this is team 2. You can set up whatever tag you want. And my character's team 1. We'll go back to the sensor and we say, look for tag of team 2. And the detection mode is I'm not going to look for colliders. I'm going to look for a rigid body. Again, I find this more reliable. I do require a line of sight, so I want it to make sure that it's like can actually see it. And you can set up what blocks your line of sight. For now, I'm just going to set nothing. Oopsie. And I'm going to set for test for LOS targets. Beep. And say I just want to like say 1%, 0.1%, which is actually 10%. And that's it. So now it's going to check to see at least 10% of the targets are visible. I have 4 targets, so as long as I can see 1 target, it will be more than 10%. And that's how that works. It's fairly simple. So now he can see this object. So let's go ahead and set up the behavior designer to get this started. So I'm going to go to the soldier himself and add a new behavior tree. And let's see here. I'm going to start off with a repeater. Even though actually I know I'm going to need a sequence as well. Okay, so when it first starts up, I want to make sure to get this sensor from my soldier. So on entry, I want to run a sequence. Which is going to hit a repeater. And in the sequence, I want to get this child. So let's search for child. And we're going to use getChild. And so getChild, we want to get the very first child because we know it's at a depth of 1. But since this is essentially a list, we're going to say the index is 0 because it starts at 0. So this would be 0, 1, 2, 3, right? And we need somewhere to store the value. And actually, it's going to store a transform, not a game object. Just a little annoying, but that's okay. So we'll call this sensor transform. So our little background noise here tonight. Okay, we've got to store the value as a sensor transform, and we're going to need to change this into a game object. So let's search transform to, and you should be able to find transform to game object. So transform to game object, we're going to need to make a game object variable. So let's call this sensor. Okay, so, and let's do one more. So a lot of these actions will get itself automatically. If you leave the target game object empty, it will get self. Not all of them do, especially some of the custom ones. So I created an extra task, which you can download from my GitHub, and it's called getSelf. And it's just going to get the self variable, the owner, and save that to variable. So let's make another one called self. So we're going to store self, then get the child of self. Then we're going to change that transform into a game object. And we're going to do this all at the beginning of Behavior Designer just because we want to cache it one time. We just want it to happen once, and that's it when we first start. Okay, then we're going to use the repeater to run the rest of the tree below it repeatedly. So we're going to repeat forever. And what do we want to do here? So let's choose task. So this is another custom action which you can download. And I'm going to use the sensor to get the nearest game object because this is going to be my target. Whatever the nearest one is to me or my agent here. So the sensor source, so we need to feed it the sensor, which we got up here. And it's going to give us the nearest target. So let's make a variable game object called target. And the nearest target is going to be saved as target. So let's add this to the repeater because we want it to keep happening. This is going to happen one time, and this is going to happen repeatedly because we want to keep searching for the target as it moves around. Okay, so once we have the nearest, we can get these specific transform points. I mean, we could just use this as the target, and that would aim only towards the target body, which is down here. But, you know, I might want it to aim for the head or the arms or whatever else. I like to do it a little bit randomly so that it's not so static for my AI. So we've got the nearest. Like I said, we could stop there, but let's give another task, and we want to, let's type LOS. Okay, so this under sensor here, and you might find yours under different ones depending on how I've organized this, but by the time you get it, but the names should be the same, so you can always search them. Sensor get LOS all target points. Let's read the description. Get all the LOS targets on a specific game object. Okay, so self object, so I'm going to hold this over. It says the sensor game object, so add the sensor and the target. The target game object is the target that we found here. We're going to pass that variable over. Then we need to store, whoopsie, I can only attach the repeater to one at a time. We're going to need another sequence here. I'm just going to copy and paste that and then say sequence this, get this one, then get this one. Okay, and we need to store all of the, it says store transform targets, but actually it's storing game objects because it's just easier. So we need a game object list to store. We'll call let's say all LOS. So these are all the line of sight targets. So let's store all those LOS. Okay, then now that we've got them all, we want to choose one randomly. We just want one random. You could, get it from the list in a different way, however you want, if you want to weight them some way or something like that. But I'm just going to choose some task, and this is another custom action, so you can get this from my GitHub. Let's just type in random. And here we want this get random game object. I should say from list. And we'll click that, add it into the sequence. And so what's the list is the all LOS. And the returned object, let's make a new variable, a game object. And we'll call it random LOS target. Sorry, you can hear my electronics in my house talking to me here. Random LOS target. And now we have the random target, and last you're going to set the aim, or you're going to shoot, or whatever your action is here, to that. So I'm just going to set the target aim for now. It's just easy. And the target game object is going to be self. Itself is doing the shooting. And the target we're going to aim at is the random LOS. Okay, so we haven't actually tested any of this. Fingers crossed that I didn't mess anything up here. And let's potentially debug this. So as you can see, it took more than one tick here to find anything, but supposedly it did. Okay, so let's see. Get self has given us, it did give us the self properly, which is the German soldier here. And the sensor transform, yep, gave us the right one. Changed to the right game object. Okay, ran our sequence down here. And it's going to get us the nearest target, which is what? Is this target body, because that's the parent. Get all the LOS points. And we can't really see it, it's just a collections here. And then it's going to get a random one. And you can see it's flipping back and forth because it keeps ticking through this, so we'll have to adjust that. And then it's going to set the aim. So you can see it keeps changing. So if we set this to fire, we're going to have it maybe fire after every time. I won't set it to fire. I'm just going to set it to a little wait so it doesn't keep pinging through them all. And we'll set this, we'll say a wait time of like 2. Okay, anyways, this should help slow it down here. So, oopsie, that was a mistake. Okay, you can see it's arm shooting the body, arm 2, arm 1, arm 1, head, and in. So I think you get the point here. So this is great. Then we can actually fire our weapon or whatever we need to do, and we're going to be firing at different points here within the target, and we get to choose what those points are. They're not random, and this can make sort of more of a dynamic way of doing things, as well as if we pause this, and let's add something in the scene. Let's create a cube. And adjust the cube size here. I'll just be lazy and do it this way. Okay, so now if we go to the sensor here and we choose that what blocks the line of sight, so let's say the default blocks the line of sight. Okay, so let's save this, and this should be on the default layer. It is, so let's hit play. And we're going to go back to our soldier to look at his tree here. And actually, okay, I'm going to lock this down, and let's look at the sensor. And we can see 75% of the target body. Oopsie. Let's grab this. Let's lock the sensor here so we don't lose this here. Okay, so now we can only see 25%. We can see 0%. So say we're at 25%. Now let's check our targets down here. We should only be shooting at what we can see. So just the arm, essentially. So again, you can see this way that it can target the parts of the body that are visible better than sort of just always shooting for like center mass or at the feet of the target, which may be hidden or partially hidden by the wall. So this sort of gives us a better way of manually setting up those targets and then shooting them. And okay, now you can see that 75% is visible, and he's picking other or better targets, or we could do it this way. So I hope this was instructive for you. It just gives you an idea of how I'm setting things up in my current game with my AI to make them just a little more intelligent than just can see, and using that as the only way to detect targets. Okay, until next time, again, this is Eric from Dumb Game Dev. I hope you enjoyed this. Leave me some comments at the bottom, and let me know how this went for you.